This is Hollywood. Matías Bombal with you. We have with us Tim Walker, one of the leading and most interesting animators in the animation business. He's smiling now because he's a very humble fellow, but a great artist. And I'm just so delighted that you're with us today to tell us about your craft.
Thank you for having me here. It's an honor to be here and spend this time with you.
When did you first know that this was the course of your life?
Well, I was 4 or 5 years old at my grandparents' house. They were babysitting my brothers and I saw a cartoon on television. And I stopped dead in my tracks and I thought, I don't know what that is, but I want to do that. I want to do that. So I took a pencil that day and started drawing on paper, and I haven't stopped. I just kept drawing and drawing. That was, 62 years ago, 63 years ago, long time ago.
From that initial moment when you decided this is it, how did you then make it happen? It's one step to dream about something and wanting to do something.
Well,
it takes a little effort to get there.
It takes a lot of effort to get there, but I was extremely lucky. You know, you hear about timing. Timing is everything. I saw that cartoon and said, that's what I want to do. I don't know what that is, but I want to do that. And I lived my dream, 50 years in animation. It was always plan A for me to be in animation. There was never a plan B. And I have thought more recently about plan B today than I ever thought about plan B years ago. What if the films that I wanted to work on, the cartoons that I wanted to work on, were done years before I saw them and they didn't make them anymore? Or maybe they were in Europe and I couldn't get there. But the luck of the whole thing was they were made right in my own backyard. Grew up in Studio City, California, and Hanna-Barbera Studios was right in the Cahuenga Pass, going from the San Fernando Valley into Hollywood. And our next door neighbor was head of publicity for Channel 7 News. And he would come over and socialize with my parents, and he had kids. I grew up on a cul-de-sac with about 25 kids from the age of 9 to 1-year-olds. I will never forget him coming over to my parents' house one day, and he says to me, Tim, you're going to love this new show. It's done by the people that do Huckleberry Hound and Yogi Bear, and it's going to be called The Flintstones, and it's going to be on ABC television in the fall. And he told me where Hanna-Barbera was located, in the Cahuenga Pass. Now, where I went to grade school was about maybe a mile and a half from there. And I used to ride my bicycle from home to school in those days. So I rode my bike up Lancashire Avenue and up Cahuenga West Boulevard, and there was Hanna-Barbera Studios, and there was a trash can. Well, son of a gun, I'm going to look inside that trash can and see what's in there. So I open up the top of the dumpster, and there's cells all over the place. I stuck my hand in, pulled out those first cells, which were probably cells of Huckleberry Hound or Yogi Bear, and I really went berserk. I mean, I've got to be in this. I've got to do this. And for probably 7 or 8 years, I loaded my backpack, my school backpack, with cells and carted them home to my parents' house almost every day. And had just, I couldn't tell you how many I had. But one interesting story, I was in that, I used to literally get into the trash can and dig around through there to find the cells, because there'd be the other trash in there too. I was in the trash can on a Saturday afternoon one day, and I hear this noise, and I hear this, get out of that trash can, you knothead. And I poke my head up and I look around, and it was Mr. Barbera of Hanna-Barbera. I didn't know who he was at the time. Well, I guess you could say it was my first meeting with Mr. Barbera. I don't recall whether I kept the cells or he told me to throw them back in the trash can or not that day. I probably kept the cells. And an interesting thing happened many, many, many years later. Mr. Barbera was having a 92-year-old birthday party at the studio, and they videotaped all the people who were still left at the studio who had known him from the original Hanna-Barbera studio. And I was one of those people, and So they shot a video greeting of everybody, wishing him a happy birthday. And I got on there and I said, "Hey, Mr. B, it's great to be here with you on your birthday and share your birthday and happy birthday. I bet you don't remember the first time we met." And I tell the story about being in the trash can, being 10 years old, and him saying, "Get out of that trash can, you knothead." It gets a good laugh, and maybe I detect a little twinkle in his eye that maybe he does remember slightly a little something that happened many years ago, and maybe it brings a little thing to his mind that, hey, maybe it was a nice thing that he was in the trash can and he's worked all these years in what he loved to do.
You just mentioned Mr. B. Was that a name that he was given from the workers inside the studio?
Yeah, everybody, Mr. B, well, I always called him Mr. Barbera, but, and I didn't have that much dealing with him really, because Mr. Barbera, he would sell the shows to the networks. He would work with the writers and the designers, and he would sell the properties to the networks, get the money, the funding from the sponsors. And once the show was sold, it would come into the studio, and Mr. Hanna would do the physical creating of the show, get the show done. He'd work with the animators, the layout guys, the background guys, all the various departments to physically get the show on film and deliver it to the networks.
Was Mr. Hanna a really hands-on kind of guy?
Mr. Hanna was a very hands-on guy. Mr. Hanna ran the studio, ran the plant.
What was he like? Did he deal with the animators directly, or did you have departments and it sort of, the information rolled downhill?
Well, at first he dealt with everybody directly, and then it got so big that he dealt with departments, and then it would roll downhill from there. But when you're sitting in the studio working, and you would all of a sudden hear over the loudspeaker in the studio, Tim Walker, call 241, call 241. Tim, call 241. Well, 241 was Mr. Hanna's extension. And 9 times out of 10, you were in trouble for one thing or another. If you heard that, it was kind of the voice from Valhalla summoning you up to the penthouse. And
what kind of trouble would you be in? What's an example of trouble?
well, if you were, now being an animator, you would have to do 100 feet of film a week for your weekly paycheck. Everything in production is based on film footage. A half-hour cartoon show is 2,000 feet of film. So the animators were supposed to animate 100 feet a week, each one, to get their weekly paycheck. Now, if you did more than 100 feet, they would pay you bonus money, and you'd get bonus money. If you did less than 100 feet, they would tolerate that for a week or two, but then you would start getting phone calls from Mr. Hanna saying, step it up, you've got to pay them for what they're paying. You got to give them the product for what they're paying you for. If they want 100 feet, you got to give them 100 feet. I had some friends. I was one of the young animators at the time. I had some friends that young guys that got into Hanna-Barbera with us, and I always did 120 feet, 130 feet every week, and always got bonus money. And they didn't care if you did that 130 feet at 12 midnight on Saturday night and was finished with it Sunday morning at 9 and stayed intoxicated the rest of the week. As long as you gave them the numbers, that's what they wanted, the numbers. So I always made sure that I gave them the numbers. And consequently, you were always working. You were always working. But if you fall under that, you're not going to have a long career there.
I would imagine it would vary how much time it would take to produce that amount of feet in the given week, depending on what the subject was.
Absolutely. If you get close-ups of characters just talking, and you remember in the Hanna-Barbera production, there were lots of close-ups of characters talking. They didn't have the luxury of doing beautiful cartoons like Tom and Jerry that they did at MGM all those years. The full animation, the absolutely gorgeous production quality, because they had to get stuff done for television, and they had to get a lot of it done for television, and you have to get it done in a certain amount of time so you can meet your air dates. So you don't have the luxury of doing that beautiful stuff. They had to devise a way to come up with limited animation, make it work, and get it done. So a lot of the times, remember, you would see a character from the waist up or the shoulders up, and you go, hey Fred, let's go over and get Dino. He's done at the vent now. Just the head would go up and down and the mouths would move. Or he would gesture and the hands would come back down. It was limited animation, but they made it work. And if you write something funny and good writing, funny writing, good stories, good character development, you can draw stick figures and people will watch it. So if you got close-up scenes of characters just talking, you could get that stuff done really quickly. If you've got a cattle stampede and the covered wagons going west and circling and the Indians attacking, you're buried under the footage and you just can't get it done. But you know what? It all kind of worked out. If you got a big heavy section 1 week, 2 weeks in a row, you most likely would get an easier section the next time out. I think the guys who were in charge of the various departments would pretty much take care of you that way.
Working on that kind of a schedule, how would the week start?
Well, what happens is you get a writer. Let's say you sell a show like the Flintstones. Okay, you have a writer who writes an episode. Mr. Barbera goes over with the writer and gets it exactly the way he wants it, and then it goes to a director, and the director would start breaking it down into scene-by-scene shots. And then once he had it directed down into scene-by-scene shots, he'd give it to a storyboard artist, and the storyboard artist would draw a storyboard of the entire half-hour episode. A storyboard is very much like looking at a comic strip. Every scene telling you, every panel telling you exactly what's going on in the scene. Once the storyboard was okayed, it would go to the layout department, and the layout department would take the storyboard, which is usually a fairly small panel, and blow it up into a larger sheet that fit the size of the animation paper. So you'd have the background, the character, whatever prop that was moving in the background. If, let's say it's Fred standing at his kitchen table, and he's going to pick up a glass and have a glass of cactus cola. The guy would draw the background of the kitchen table, Fred standing there, the cactus cola glass on the table, and maybe one drawing of Fred standing there, and maybe the next drawing has got Fred holding the glass up and he's drinking it. Then it would go to the animator after the director had timed out the exposure sheets, and the exposure sheets are just like big notebook sheets of paper. Every line on an exposure sheet represents one frame of film. So the director times out every action on the exposure sheet, because you have to be at 2,000 feet of film. You can't let a show run over and be 3,500 feet for one half-hour show. They're not going to pay for it. The studio would go bankrupt in a matter of weeks if it did things like that. So you have to be very precise about this stuff. So the animator, me as an animator, I would get 100 feet of film. I'd get the exposure sheets, the layout drawings, and I would take the layout drawings and start animating on sheets of paper. Fred, let's say it was Fred drinking that cactus cola, he might be standing there next to the table. He might anticipate down, reach and grab the cola, bring it to himself, look at it, and then he might have a reaction, cactus cola, and then go up into a big drink and then pull it up like this so it pours down into his mouth, bring it back down again, and set it down on the table. I would put those drawings in and all that. I would determine what is going to happen here with this scene. The layout guy is only giving me the drawings and showing me the size relationship of those drawings and props for that particular scene. I would determine what the animation would look like.
Were there some hairy stories getting a week's worth of work out on occasion? Something would come up, some problem in the construction of the story? Or was it that you guys worked so well together because you're working like a factory, quite literally?
Very much like a factory.
It didn't come up often.
Very much like a factory. An extremely creative factory, but still a factory line situation. By the time it got to me, all the real problems and everything had been ironed out. That stuff was all taken care of, because by the time it got to the animators, they had to get the animation done, get it to an assistant to do the fill-in drawings, and then get it to ink and paint, get the cells painted, and get it shot, get it under camera, because there were other things that had to happen after we were done. So by the time it got to me, it was pretty well under control. The problems are all ironed out in story and storyboarding.
You studied drawing. You had a formal education. Tell us about how you went from the young kid that wanted to make this a dream, and what steps did you take in educating yourself so you could reach that goal?
I went to grade school at St. Charles Grade School in the San Fernando Valley. Rode my bike up to Hanna-Barbera, got cells, and went to grade school. Then I went to Notre Dame High School in the San Fernando Valley now. That's a Catholic boys' school. You know, you got to get good grades to stay in that school. I D'd and F'd my way through school because I don't care about English, geometry, algebra, any of that stuff. I'm going to do cartoons and I don't care. So I would take the test papers, turn them over, and I would draw on the back of the test papers because I'm going to be an animator. I don't care about this stuff. And I would turn the test papers in with the drawings on them, and I D'd and F'd my way through school, and then I guess they needed my parents' money, so they let me stay in. But anyway, I got out of high school, and I went to Chenard Art School in downtown Los Angeles. And Chenard Art School was where the great old Disney animators from the 30s and 40s, a lot of those guys went to school there. A lot of great artists went to school there. I went there for 3 years, and the 4th year it became the California Institute of the Arts, also known as Cal Arts today. I graduated from the first graduation class, 1970, of Cal Arts. And I started working. And of course, I drew the whole time. I drew constantly, all the time. I loved drawing, and but I was going to be in animation. I was not going to be a fine artist or a painter or any of that stuff. It was animation all the way. Is what I wanted to do, and so I just kept drawing. I went to grade school, high school, went to college, kept drawing, and got hired. My first job in animation was in 1964. I was 16 years old. And the guy who lived on the corner of the block I lived on had a small commercial studio called Murakami Wolf Films, and they subcontracted the opening titles to a TV show called Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. Richard Basehart, I'm sure you remember that show. It was a 20th Century Fox. It was a live action show. But if you remember looking at the opening titles, there was a radar screen. And the white line would animate around and go Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, starring Richard Basehart, and that would wipe the scene to the next thing. And it's funny, my wife Susan and I came home from a party one night, maybe 6-7 months ago, and I turned on late night television, and this show comes on. And I'm watching the show, and I see these titles, and I'm thinking, why do I know this? Why do I know these titles? Oh my gosh. I need a cold towel to put on my forehead. I worked on that 50 years ago. I worked on those opening titles, and but it was the greatest. I mean, I was Timmy in Wonderland for 50 years, and that was 64. I did 4 or 5 years of school, of college and stuff, and then really started in 1969 full time. But I say, I got paid for a professional job in 1964, so that's when I started.
One of the legends of animation that was an inspiration and an educator for you was Tehe. Tell us about Tehe.
Tehe, now do you know what the T stands for? Thornton He. Thornton He, and he was a cartoon character in himself. He dressed loudly and boldly in colors and patterns. He was a designer, a great designer. He was great at designing the Hollywood stars in the 30s and 40s. When they would do a Warner Brothers cartoon and it would be all the caricatures of the Hollywood stars, Tehe would design all that stuff. He was just great at that stuff. And there was a great Disney cartoon called Mother Goose Goes Hollywood from the late 30s. Tehe designed all of those characters. He was just a real creative guy. He would not only draw and design, draw with pencils and colored pencils and paint and stuff. He'd take yarn and corks and erasers and all kinds of whatever he could find, and he could put that stuff into a great design. He was a great guy, and he was just a great designer.
What do you think you learned from him the most? How did he influence your work particularly?
Well, I think what I learned from him was that you can be it's not just a paper and a pencil. It's a world of things to use to create with. So, open yourself up. Be open to all the stuff that you can create with. Don't just focus on it's a pencil and a paper and we have to design it like this. No, it's a whole world of things that we can design with.
In 2007, you had a remarkable bit of news that changed the entire course of your life. What happened?
Well, I started to notice a weakness in my right arm. I've been drawing with my right hand my entire life, and I started to notice a weakness. And I thought for sure it was carpal tunnel syndrome from all the drawing and writing. And so I go to the doctor, and the doctor says, you need to go see a neurologist. So I go to the neurologist, and the neurologist puts me through these tests. And this is still tough for me to talk about, but it's important. Because I only speak from the heart. That's all I know how to speak from. He puts me through these tests, and he throws a left hook that drops me right to the ground. Lateral Parkinson's disease on my right side. And it destroys my ability to draw. It crushes me. It destroys me on the spot. I'm through. I'm finished. My career is going to disintegrate right in front of my eyes. I'm done. I'm totally done. So I crawled out of that doctor's office. I crawled out of there. I had a resentment against everybody, everything, and my higher power was right at the top. How could you do this to me? I don't kill people. I don't rob people. I'm a pretty nice guy most of the time. I'll take anything but this. Anything but this. I will confide in you that I am a proud member of a 12-step group that has kept me clean and sober for 8 years at that point. And my best thinking was to load my car with Absolute, my poison of choice, drive to Mexico, and shake and bake into oblivion because I'm done. I'm screwed. It's done. Accept it. Well, that was my thinking for about 42 seconds. And then I thought, you know what? I'm not done. God, I need help, and I need help right now. I need help. I'm convinced he revealed to my mind what to do, and the first thing was to be of service in all aspects of my life, in program, at home, at work, and on the street. And by the way, you have a left hand. I went to the bookstore, I bought a sketchbook, and I opened it up, and with my left hand for the first time in my life, I wrote drawings from the left. And I taught myself to draw and write left-handed and saved a career. Now, I didn't do that. I had a lot of help from certain other areas, a lot from above. I went to the stationery store, and you remember back in grade school, like you're in the first, second grade, and you have these, you're learning how to print, and you have the paper that has the lines to do capital letters and small letters. I filled the whole book up left-handed, just like I was 6 years old in second grade again. A's, B, I did the whole alphabet. I did sentences. I still have that book somewhere in my office, I think. And I started drawing left-handed, and I knew whatever I got would get better if I just kept doing it. And surprisingly enough, the first couple of drawings were not that bad. And I just kept doing it. I just kept doing it. Now, I tell a lot of people this, I'm just a dumbbell cartoonist from Burbank. That's all I am. That's all I ever wanted to be. I didn't want to be anything else. Had I been an intellectual, I would have overthought this whole thing, sunk into a deep depression, and never come out. Never come out. But I just said, you know what? I'm going to teach myself to draw left-handed. And I got up and I did it. And that's how that happened.
How long did it take to re-educate your left hand?
It didn't seem like it took that long for me to do it, really. I mean, the first few drawings are not that bad, and they kept getting better, and I drew every day. I used to go to meetings. I used to go to a 12-step meeting every morning, and I would take the book with me, and I would sit and draw and listen and draw and listen. And I'm sure all these guys kept thinking, oh, this guy's taking notes in here. What's he doing with all this writing and whatever he's doing in that book? Well, I was drawing pictures. And I'll never forget one of the guys who's kind of the leader of that particular group of guys, who I still go to today, 17 years later, loves to tell the story about how I came in there. And he sees this guy, this man comes in, and he's drawing these pictures, these cartoon pictures in this book. What the hell are you doing? A New Yorker. What's this? What are you doing? And then he tells me what he's doing, and he's worked on all these cartoons and all this. And then he's drawn with his left hand. He's been doing it right-handed the whole time. So I'm blessed. What can I tell you?
A marvelous and perhaps unexpected result was the development of a joyful bit of work called Drawings from the Left. Tell us about it.
Well, I was doing all these drawings, and every day they were getting good, and people were looking at them, and they were liking them. And my wife, Susan, who's a great artist, was looking at them one day, and she looks at one, and she says, "My God, I can't tell the difference from your right or your left hand." And I guess I just kind of thought, I need to do something with this. I need to do something with this. This has to be a little bit more than just drawings in a book. So I thought, drawings from the left or Parkinson's pictures. And the whole idea is really inspiration. It has to be inspiration. I mean, I can't figure out how to make it anything bigger than what it is. This problem hit me. I was devastated. This is what I did. And you can do it too. You don't give up. You never give up. So I filled up about 8 sketchbooks, all left-handed, every page, and dated them, and they kept getting better and better and better. And I had a friend in animation who said, so-and-so over at this other studio, his mom lives in China and has connections with a big printing place over in China, and he prints books for people, and they're very, very affordable, and you should do the book through him. And we did it. I had a book signing down in Studio City. CBS News came, the health editor for CBS News, Lisa Siegel, came and did a whole story on me at the studio, came to the book signing, and I think I have, of the 1,000 books, I think I have about 10 left. They were not. It was not any big scale, Random House book or that kind of thing. It was just books that I did, and I wound up giving a lot of them away. Somebody with Parkinson's, I would instantly give one to. Somebody going through something, that I would give it to them. Somebody in the program, I'd give it to them. Some people bought them, but it's just been. It was great. It's just a great feeling. You can't. It makes me feel good. What can I say?
I would suppose that many people have influenced your life and work. Can you name a few of the greater ones, or perhaps one of the greatest of influences in your work?
The animator who I really think was the greatest of them all was an animator named Fred Moore at Walt Disney Studios. And Fred Moore was a naive artist that came out of the Antelope Valley in Southern California in the early 30s. At 18, 19 years old, walked into Disney Studios with just some rough drawings on cardboard paper that his father would have from the laundromat from doing his shirts. And he walked in, showed him to Walt Disney, he hired him on the spot, and he turned Disney animation upside down within 3 or 4 years. He was responsible for the Three Little Pigs. That was a groundbreaking cartoon in 1933 because it really brought about character animation, 3 distinct personalities of these 3 little pigs, as opposed to the rubber hose early cartoon characters that were just kind of characters going through the motions. Oh, it's fun to do this because we can make him do these things. Whereas the 3 little pigs looked like characters that were thinking and motivated to do these things, like they were real believable characters. And of course, then he went on to, he really gave character to Mickey Mouse, from the early Ub Iwerks rubber hose Mickey Mouse character to a Mickey that had real feelings, real emotions. It was a real character. And of course, then he designed the Seven Dwarfs for Snow White, and boy, it doesn't get any better than those. And the big thing that he did is he established something we call squash and stretch. Now, if you think of the Seven Dwarfs, and you think of those jowls, those rounded jowls that the dwarfs have, if you squash them up and then stretch them down, that's what gives a character. That's what gives him personality. The squashing and stretching, the changing the shapes in that face, that really puts character across. It's not, everything before that just seemed to be like a tracing of a character moving the same way all the time. He put squash and stretch in it, and nothing's been the same ever since then. And it's a major, major thing in animation. There was another guy, Norm Ferguson, who was not a very good artist. The story was that he was working at Terry Toons in the late 20s, early 30s, and he was a cameraman. And there were some drawings missing from a scene that he was filming that night. So he put the drawings in himself, got some paper and put the drawings that he thought should be in there, and did the drawings, and they were better than what the animator did. He understood animation. In other words, he was not so bogged down in the individual drawing of a particular drawing and getting all the detail right. He was more interested in this drawing, moving over here and doing this. So he got the flow of the animation, and then you could give it to an assistant animator who could put in all the gingerbread, all the detail. He was more concerned with the movement. And what is animation? Animation is movement, not static drawings, movement. So I always enjoyed his animation because I was not really a great artist when I started, but I learned animation and tried to work as rough as I could to get the animation down, and then try to get better as an artist as I would go. So those were a couple guys that stood out to me. There were two other guys that worked at MGM. Irv Spence, who I mentioned before, who was a great Tom and Jerry animator, great animator, and fun guy, and I did assistant work for him. And another guy at MGM called Ed Love, who worked for Tex Avery on the great Red Hot Riding Hood series and those things. He was another one that worked very, very rough because he was thinking of animation, and he always had to have great assistants to tie it all down with. So those are a few of the guys, but I worked with a lot of great artists, great artists.
It would seem that your career managed to bridge the gap between the truly classic animation of the golden era, the remnants of what had been left of that. Right when you started, all those guys were still working.
Right.
They were still there.
Right.
To the modern digital age of computer animation, which is starting now, and
Right.
everything that happened in between. So you are a very interesting position in the history of your craft to see the development and transition from one to the other. In recent years, you've worked on projects like Samurai Jack, Johnny Bravo, Justice League, Dexter's Laboratory, even Ren and Stimpy and the Batman animated series, even something that's popular again now, Powder Puff Girls.
Oh yeah.
In this capacity, you're working as an animation director. What does an animation director do?
Okay, well, let me give you a little background on this. I was working at Hanna-Barbera when we were still doing animation here in the States. And then animation started going because of the economics of it, and there was so much production. They started freelancing animation all over the world. China, Japan, Taiwan, Korea, Australia, all over the place. So it became apparent that Hanna-Barbera they needed the young guys who were there because they still had production. They would do pre-production packages here, which consisted of storyboards, designs, layouts, exposure sheets, color models, and they would send this pre-production package overseas. They would do the animation overseas and then send it back here to the U.S. Okay, so animation is going the way of the dodo. It's going away. So you better find something you like to do if you're going to stay in this business. And they came to the young guys at Hanna-Barbera and they said, now look, you got a choice. You can learn how to do storyboards and become a storyboard artist, or you can become an animation director if you want. I looked at storyboarding, and I was not a fast, great artist at the time. And I thought, man, I'm never going to make it as a storyboard artist, so I'm going to try to learn animation directing. Well, there was a guy there who was the head of the animation director. His name was Ray Patterson. Ray Patterson was a great Disney animator from Fantasia, Dumbo, Pinocchio, those things, a lot of the Golden Age shorts at the time. And then he went to MGM when Disney's had the strike in the early 40s. He went to MGM and became a classic animator on the Tom and Jerry series with Irv Spence. Well, Ray Patterson was in charge of the animation directors at Hanna-Barbera. So we would go to Ray Patterson and he taught us how to time an exposure sheet. And I've explained earlier, an exposure sheet is like a big ledger sheet. Every frame, every line on that sheet represents one frame of film. And you have, like I said, you have to have 2,000 feet of film for a half-hour cartoon show. So you have to time everything out so it's precise. You time it out even before it gets to the story, before it even gets to the exposure sheets. A director will use a stopwatch. It'll literally time out a scene, act it out, and it'll say, 4 feet, 12 frames. He'll literally time it out like that. They'll get it so precise that they're right down to the 2,000 feet. So you have to time all this action out on an exposure sheet and make sure it's exactly to the footage that the director wants. In other words, you can't let an animator fall in love with a scene that's supposed to be 5 feet of film, and all of a sudden it's 35 feet of film because he's got this character doing all these things. No, you've got to do exactly what they tell you to do and be precise with it. So an animation director times out the exposure sheet. Everything that moves has to be timed out on that exposure sheet. Now, I've had exposure sheets. The direction for the animation is on the left-hand side of the sheet. The columns on the right-hand side are for the animators to write their drawing numbers so they know where they are at what given point on any scene. I have had exposure sheets with so much going on them, especially shows like Batman, the animated series, which I worked on. I got a great story about that. I worked on almost every one of those. There was so much action going on in these scenes that the entire exposure sheet was covered with my direction. In other words, an animator overseas would have to get a brand new clean exposure sheet to put his stuff down because there was no room on my exposure sheet because there was so much going on in these scenes. And I often wondered, to me it looked like the Rosetta Stone. There was so much on there. And I always thought to myself, what would it be like to be, say, a Korean or something overseas, a different culture, getting this scene to animate and seeing all this action. I'd have a nervous breakdown. I wouldn't know where to start. But there are great people over there that have done great jobs for us over the years. And I'm convinced they're just like us. Young guys and gals that grew up loving cartoons and animation, got into the industry, and are doing great jobs over there for us. So, but anyway, to get back to animation directing, you have to be in charge of everything that goes on in that scene, and you got to make sure everything that moves is put down on that exposure sheet.
When you're assigned work for hire, you have to draw the character in the situation that's been storyboarded. How creative can you then be in the process where you have an assignment that has to be a certain way? Where does your creativity come in at that process?
Well, in being an animator, I would try to find a creative way in getting that character, whether it's Fred Flintstone or Huckleberry Hound or Samurai Jack, whatever, in doing whatever that action he's supposed to be doing in a scene. When you see these characters and you do something and it breathes life into this two-dimensional drawing, that's, to me, where the real creativity is. when it no longer becomes a drawing, it becomes something real. That's where the real creative thing is. I have to deal with pencil and paper because those are the tools I have to use to supply the people with what they're paying me for, what I need to do. So I'm stuck doing that. But if I can come up with a creative way of saying whatever it is I have to put across, whatever that character has to put across, that's the art for me. That stuff there. Like I said, the scene with Fred Flintstone, it has to be Fred Flintstone. I have to draw Fred Flintstone. I can't change him or anything. But I might be able to come up with a very creative way of how he picked up that bottle of Cactus Cola and drank it. Something that the average guy might just, he picks it up, drinks it, sets it down. I might think of it another way. Something that gives it a little more spark. Something that gives it a little more play. And that's where the artist in doing what I do.
Tell us about the sometimes controversial but always creative Ralph Bakshi. What was he like?
Ralph Bakshi. I went to work for Ralph Bakshi in 1970 on a picture called Heavy Traffic. It was kind of an autobiographical picture about Ralph growing up in New York as a cartoonist in the 50s and 60s. And I was an assistant animator. There were a lot of great old-time Disney, Warner Brothers, MGM animators working there at the time. So it was a lot of fun because you could learn from those guys. They were great guys, great talents. And Ralph was a wild man. He was a Brooklyn, New Yorker, in your face with pizza falling out of his mouth and all of that, and brash and kind of like I know another guy that's kind of like that, but it was fun. I enjoyed it. He was totally different from anything I'd ever known when I growing up in the San Fernando Valley in California. But the thing I liked about Bakshi's is he was trying to do full animation to the best of his ability. Ralph, the thing about Ralph is you never knew what the story was about. The story was in Ralph's head, and he kind of, what's the saying, flew by the seat of his pants and getting it done. So you never quite knew where the story was going, what these characters were doing. But these great old-time animators, like Irv Spence, who was a great Tom and Jerry animator on the classic Tom and Jerry's of the 40s, was one of the animators there. And I knew Irv from Hanna-Barbera, and he was just the greatest, a great guy to learn from. It was kind of a different adventure every day in Ralph's studio. You never knew what was going to happen. He could blow up at somebody, and then he could come in and grab somebody out of the chair and swing them around in a dance step and say, "That was great, that animation I saw yesterday on the movie. Oh, I loved it. But it was a fun place. It was a cartoon studio. Cartoony things happened there. Ralph used to like to play ping pong, and there was a ping pong table in one of the rooms there. So Irv Spence was a great ping pong player, and he liked to play too. So they were playing ping pong one day, and I happened to wander out there. The studio was all in the front of the old Ready Whipped cream building. They had gone out of business or moved, and Ralph had rented spots in this building. And I had a friend and we sat in the way back in the dungeons of this place. We had our animation desk set back there, and we were out of the limelight. Well, I walked up there one day, and Irv and Ralph were playing ping pong. So I don't remember who won, but somebody asked me if I'd like to play, and yeah, okay. So I think I played Irv Spence a game, and I beat him. And then I beat him again, and I beat him again. And then Ralph said to Irv, "Give me that paddle." And Ralph played. I beat him, and I beat him, and I beat him. And then he threw the paddle down and says, "I'm going back to work. Go back to work." Well, this went on for quite a while. And finally, I used to be sitting at my desk, and I'd hear this, Tim, get out here, Tim." And he'd be standing at the other end of the ping pong table with a paddle. "Pick up that paddle." There were times when I think we played all day. Oh God, I got so sick of ping pong I could scream, but he couldn't beat me. Finally, Irv Spence was not in the studio this day, but finally I just decided I got to let him beat me. I can't stand this any longer. I let him beat me. And he gets Irv on the phone. "I beat the little bum. I finally beat the little bum." Well, what I couldn't understand is why they didn't understand this themselves. I played total defense. I had no offense whatsoever. But I could hit the ball so it would spin, and you'd hit it and it'd go right into the net. Or I'd hit the ball, it would spin, and you'd hit it off the table coming back at me. I had no offense at all, but I knew how to play defense. And so Ralph Bakshi finally, he probably beat me a few more times after that, but we played a lot of ping pong. He was a great guy to work for. He tried his best to do quality films. I know he's very controversial, but there were great animators there. They did great scenes of animation. It was a fun place to work. It was kind of like a taste of what it might have been like in the 1940s or 50s at the old classic studios, what it might have been like to work there with those guys. So I really enjoyed it. I worked for him for 4 years, and I've seen him a couple times recently and talked with him, and I gave him one of my books, and he had a book out that he autographed and gave to me, and I've called him on the phone a couple times. He's down in New Mexico. And I thanked him for 4 of the most fun years of my life working for him in that studio. And he enjoyed hearing that, and I thought it needed to be told to him. And I enjoyed it.
What was your involvement with Coonskin? Can you remember what you did for that cartoon?
I was an assistant animator on Coonskin. I started at the very beginning of it and worked all the way through the whole thing.
Were there particular characters that you were?
I worked on all the characters. I worked on the Reverend. I don't remember his name. I worked on the fox, the bear, the rabbit, the 3 major characters, all the miscellaneous characters. I think I worked on probably every character to some degree or another, yes.
Some of your work was theatrical, like with Bakshi,
Yes.
and the majority of it was on television.
Yes.
Did you ever get a chance to see your completed work at all? And what was your reaction in seeing your work on the screen or on the television?
Early on, I would watch them when I know they would be on. The Bakshi stuff, you see, in those days, unless you were Walt Disney Studios and had Walt Disney at the front of your credits on the titles, it was really tough to get an animated show in the theaters. I guess Bakshi has some kind of distribution deal with us. Well, he obviously did. But it was so rare to see one that I don't recall ever seeing one in a theater. I saw them later on when they were released on video and DVDs and things like that. But I would have gone to see the Ralph Bakshi stuff had I have known where to see them, but I never saw. It seems to me they came out and were gone within a week or something. And I think Coonskin especially had some kind of big ruckus in New York at a major screening of a museum screening or something, and caused quite a bit of controversy.
And apparently controversy seemed to follow him with some of his other projects, but from an artistic perspective, you thought he was doing some pretty neat stuff.
I loved him. He did neat stuff. He got great artists. He had Frank Frazetta work for him on Fire and Ice, and Fantasy Illustration goes there. He's the best of the best, Frank Frazetta. Mike Plug on Wizards. Great artists. And he was just a great guy to work for.
Tell us about Batman.
Batman the Animated Adventure. I've worked on every Batman cartoon show from Warner Brothers since 1989 till almost the present. And I loved working on them, and I came to the studio through a friend who worked with me at Disney's. I think we were working on DuckTales, which was a very popular show. And I was under contract to Disney TV Animation. And when you're under contract to people, then if somebody asks me to do freelance, this industry is very much like the, the migrant field workers. The peaches come in Bakersfield. We throw the bushel baskets into the trunks of our Lincolns, and we drive up to Bakersfield, we pick peaches until the oranges come in farther north, and then we go up there and pick. In other words, you go to a studio when there's work. When it dries up, you go to another studio. Okay, so I'm working at Disney's, and one of my friends who I worked for many, many years at Hanna-Barbera came to Disney's, and she was the associate producer on DuckTales with another friend of mine. And I worked on DuckTales for 2 or 3 years with them. And then she left and went to Warner Brothers, and she was vice president in charge of animation, I think. And she called me up one day and she said, Tim, we got to have lunch. I haven't seen you in so long. Let's have lunch. So she invited me to come up for lunch to a little restaurant around the corner from Warner Animation over in the San Fernando Valley. And I went over, and this was back in my, shall we say, imbibing days. And so she poured 3 or 4 martinis down me as fast as she could, maybe a quick bite of lunch, and she said, "Hey, come on over to the studio. I want to show you what we're doing." Okay. So I go over to the studio with her, and she's showing me all this gorgeous, gorgeous Batman presentation of Batman the Animated Series, the very first Batman that they did. I believe it was 89 or 90, somewhere in that time period. And so I'm looking at it, and it's all gorgeous. Bruce Timm was one of the major artists on it. He was just a fabulous artist for that superhero stuff. I'm looking at all this stuff, and she says to me out of the blue, she says, "Now, when could you slug a board?" And slugging a board was one of the preliminary things you do before you do the animation timing. I won't go into it, but it's just one of the steps. And so I'm just kind of thinking, well, now I guess, completely forgetting I've been under contract at Disney's and I'm supposed to give them the first opportunity. If there's freelance to be done, they have the right to choose first to give me freelance before I can accept it from someone else. Well, that phone call, 27 years later, I'm still at Warner Brothers. Now, how blessed is that?
I first met you through the movies. It's a project of yours and your good friend Woody Wise,
Right.
and a bunch of other guys that get
Right.
together on a regular basis, the Cliffhangers, featured in a wonderful independent film that is still making rounds of film festival circuits all over the United States, The Brotherhood of the Popcorn. We reviewed that on Matías Bombal's Hollywood in 2014, and it's just a charming story of a social aspect of your life that is fun, getting together with these guys and watching classic movies. But the way that director, Inda Reed, has told the story of your experience and the discovery of Parkinson's, and was there to capture the development of this wonderful book, Drawing from the Left, I really think is such an inspirational message for so many people, because they realize that maybe they know someone with Parkinson's, maybe they have Parkinson's, that they can overcome what they think is absolutely an impossibility, a death sentence of sorts for their previous life the way it was, because your inspirational story is so remarkable. And now, not only have you made this wonderful film, and we can see this, you've come up with another book. Tell us about Shaken, Not Broken.
Shaken, Not Broken, An Artist's Journey Through Hell, and I've been there, really came about. The first book, Drawings from the Left, is really a black and white illustrations. And I started doing watercolors, which I haven't really done many of them before. I drew so many cartoon characters. I was always drawing cartoon characters. Now I really like doing the watercolors in that. So I started doing all these watercolors. And I have a friend who's a good friend of mine, and I was talking with him about it one day, and he suggested the title to me, Shaken, Not Broken. And I thought the title was great. The title was just great. And then I came up with An Artist's Journey Through Hell. So I thought, I'm going to take 50 of what I feel are the best paintings, maybe talk it over with a few other people. And now you have to remember, when I had to train myself left-handed, I was fully prepared to go abstract if I had to. If I couldn't draw, I've always loved drawing the three-dimensional 30s and 40s style cartoon type characters. I've loved drawing those kind of things. I've never been an abstract artist, although I have joked with people and said, look, I'll go abstract and watch this, I'll become a billionaire overnight, right? Well, I didn't, but that's okay. So I got into drawing the color stuff, and we came up with the title of the book, and so I picked several of the watercolors. I'm painting 2 or 3 watercolors a day, and I'll also say quite a few get torn up at night when I get into the deep areas of my brain, and the committee takes over, and I lose sight of where I'm going. But I always have a way to get back. I always get back. I don't dwell in those areas, but I'm human. I fall down, but I get back up. So anyhow, and my wife, who's a great artist and painter, and is really more of a fine artist than I am, has looked at a lot of this stuff and said wonderful things about it, and she points out things that she likes about it that I don't even see because I don't even know that stuff. But she loved my use of color. I never took any color classes. I was always black and white because I was dealing in pencil. So she would say how much she loved how bold the colors were and how great the colors were and how this, that, and the other thing. So I put this book together, and again, this is a book about inspiration. This is not a book about me and my art. It's a book about inspiration. It's like I was given 50 years, a 50-year career in my dream. I lived my dream.
What have the reactions been to the first book, Drawing from the Legs?
People are shocked, amazed, can't believe it. So inspirational, so just blessed. I mean, I had no clue that I could do what I did left-handed, and people see that and they're dumbfounded. You know, people say to me all the time, you know, I can't draw a straight line, and I say to them, you know, sure you can. Go over there, get that ruler, and draw a straight line. But I'm not interested in the straight line you're going to draw. I want to see the curlicue, the oval, the broken. I want to see those lines. I love to tell people, get a sketchbook. These can be people who have no artistic talent whatsoever. But I like to say to them, get a sketchbook. Costs you $4 or $5. Get some pencils. Soft pencils. Don't get hard pencils. Soft pencils. And just doodle. Doodle anything. You can just put straight lines down. And then one day, you're going to put one curved. Draw a circle. Just draw a circle. And up towards the top of that circle, but within inside that circle, draw a little tiny circle. And put 2 little dots in front of that, over that. Now you've got a face. In other words, draw, draw, draw. What the important thing is not the outcome on the paper. The important thing to me is the feeling of the creative process is so fulfilling for your soul. It's so, I would not trade that feeling for every piece of gold in the world, because it's a spiritual thing. It's a creating thing. It's just the best. It's the best. I'm at peace when I do that. God is on his throne. The birds are chirping. Kids are happy. I'm at peace when I can get to that point. Now, I can't get to that point every day, but I get to it as much as I can. I try every day to get there. And when I get there, it's the most wonderful feeling in the world. I remember one of the wonderful artists that I worked with over the years. He ghosted the pogo strip for Walt Kelly years ago, the great pogo strip. This guy was so good, he ghosted that strip for Walt Kelly, so that tells you how this guy was. He used to say to me all the time, Tim, remember, there are no good, bad, or indifferent drawings. They're your drawings. Do whatever you want. Find your drawings, your designs, your art, whatever it is. And whatever it is, it's your art. So you can be anything. But do the drawings and enjoy that creative process, because it is going to put you at peace in here. And isn't that what we all want anyway? Isn't that what we all want?
What advice do you give kids interested in animation?
Draw. And by the way, did I tell you? Draw all the time. Draw everything and anything. Draw, draw, draw. And if they want to be in animation, I say to them, if it's meant to be, it will be. It might not be today, it might not be tomorrow, but if it's meant to be, it will be. I'm all about giving back to the kids, and I'm not out to crush anybody. I want to encourage, support, encourage, inspire. And that's why I decided to come up with, if it's meant to be, it will be. But draw, draw, draw. And if it doesn't get there, if they don't get to that point and work in the industry, they will at least get the satisfaction of drawing and that creative process and the great feeling it gives them inside. Maybe they'll go on and do another career, but they'll have drawing to do for the rest of their life. And they'll be grateful for that, because I think everybody needs an artistic outlet. Music, sculpting, painting, drawing, anything. Think how wonderful this world would be if everybody on this planet had some kind of a creative, artistic outlet. I think we'd be a lot better off.
Tim, tell me about the artistic process. How does it happen? Does it start in your brain? Is it a bit of muscle memory? Do you start drawing a line and then it just develops from there? Do you have an idea first, or does it just come out of the ether? How does it work for you?
I think it happens any number of ways. I don't think you can nail it down to one certain thing. When I'm doing like a drawing in this book, any one of these drawings in this book, I may have seen a person stand. Now, I draw a lot of poses, I call them. Characters in poses, in action, because being an animator, you think of poses, movement. I may have seen somebody standing somewhere or doing some kind of pose and thought, man, I really like that pose. I want to draw that pose. I'm going to draw that. So I'm thinking of literal poses I want to do. Other times, I might not have a clue as to what I want to do, but I've got to get something out. I have this feeling inside of me, oh, I've got to do some art. I'm chomping at the bits to do some art. And here's the most intimidating page an artist faces, the blank page. It's the most intimidating page in the world. To get the pencil from up here down to here is like, a million miles. It's what, a foot and a half? A million miles, I can't get there. But once I get there, once this pencil touches, or pen touches this paper, it seems to take off. It seems to go. A lot of the times I won't know what I want to do, but I'll just start. Cartoon characters are based on ovals. Ovals, an oval for a head, a bigger oval for the body, whatever. I start movement. I start moving the pencil around, and things start happening, and little things in here, and little things in here, and little happy accidents that you don't think are going to be there, and all of a sudden, where'd that come from? So there's that element. There's things that you want to do, and you sit down and you do them. There's things that just, I got to get some art out, so I got to get moving. I got to start moving it around. I got to get involved to make this art. Because if I don't get involved to make this art, I'm not going to make the art. So I think, if I'm answering your question, it's a whole area of things that have to, what is it, the stars are aligned, the muses are out, and everything is in its right place, and it works. And there are times when it doesn't, and you just can't get there. Now, I have times when, the medication that I take to do what I'm able to do, I have to take that medication 4 times a day, and sometimes I'm, in between medications, and I'm coming down on one set, going up on another set, and I'm not quite in the realm of being able to do what I normally do. So I make it a point of not going towards a pencil or a piece of paper at that time. I stay away from it, because I'll tend to get very frustrated, because I had this ability for my whole life. Now all of a sudden it gets shut down in certain times during the day. But I remember that, you know what? It has always come back. Every time, every day, it has always come back. And I hold on to that. Now sometimes I forget, and that's when I tear up artwork. Cranky 12-year-old kid shows up again. fall on the ground, but my wife Susan gets me up, program gets me up, gratitude gets me up. I have a roof over my head. I have the woman of my dreams on the floor beneath me while I'm going through all this tantrum. I have had a 50-year career doing what I loved. Who gets a 2-year career doing what they love? So when everything hits the right spot and the muses are all out, like I said, and the planets are all aligned and the meds are working. Now, I talk about these meds that I have to take and being in a 12-step program. I don't abuse those meds. I follow my doctor's instructions. I take them and have them do exactly what they're supposed to do. And I've had a good life. I mean, I turned it around since all this happened by these meds. So I play by the rules with that stuff. And so I'm here to just say, you know, this is about inspiration. If you're going through anything, you stick with it. You don't give up no matter what. You get up. You get up and move on. I am not going to let this disease take me down. I have got friends who have it, and it's terrible. But I'm a positive person. I'm a cockeyed optimist. I always have been. I'm just not going to let it take me down. It will not take me down. If it does, I will go down kicking and screaming, and I will leave a legacy that showed that you don't have to go down.
Can you think of one thing in your life experience which has been so majestic, especially inspiring for others, of which you're most proud?
You know, it's got to be my family, my kids, my kids, my grandkids. Now, I've got to tell you, I've been married 3 times, and all good people. All good people. I have a good relationship with my ex-wives and Susan, who's the love of my life, and all my extended family. I have wonderful people that I consider part of the family. Some might be on the outskirts of it, but they're still part of it. I have met wonderful people because of this disease. I've met wonderful people that have said the most wonderful things to me. And never, never in my life, in a million years, did I ever think I would have anything to say that would ever mean anything to anyone else. And now it appears maybe I have something that has to be said, and maybe somebody is using me as a tool to say those things. And if that indeed is what's happening, I am grateful that I recognize that and can let that happen.
Tim Walker, thank you so much for joining us today on Matías Bombal's Hollywood. It's been such a great pleasure to have you, and especially so because in addition to being a great artist and such an inspiration, I have you as a dear friend.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure and joy to be here with you.